this episode, we look at the people and organizational roles behind data protection, because security controls do not protect data by themselves. Someone has to decide what the data is, how sensitive it is, who should use it, where it can go, how long it should be kept, and what happens when something goes wrong. The names can feel similar at first, especially when you hear owner, custodian, steward, operator, controller, processor, and subprocessor close together. The practical difference is that each role answers a different accountability question. Who is responsible for the value and proper use of the data? Who protects it day to day? Who keeps its quality and meaning consistent? Who operates the systems that handle it? Who decides why personal data is processed? Who processes it for someone else? Once those questions become clear, the roles stop feeling like vocabulary and start feeling like a map of responsibility. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A data owner is usually the person or business role accountable for a set of data. The owner does not necessarily own the data in a personal sense, and the owner may not be the person who stores it or maintains the servers. Instead, the owner is responsible for decisions about the data's purpose, classification, access, acceptable use, and protection expectations. For example, a human resources leader may be the data owner for employee records because that business area understands what the records mean, who needs them, and how sensitive they are. A finance leader may own payroll or billing data. A product leader may own customer usage data. The owner should understand the business value and risk of the data well enough to make decisions about it. When security teams ask who can approve access, who can classify the data, or who accepts residual risk, the data owner is often the role they are looking for. A data custodian is responsible for protecting, storing, maintaining, or administering data according to the owner's requirements. If the owner says what should happen to the data, the custodian helps make it happen in the technical or operational environment. Custodians may manage databases, storage platforms, backup systems, file shares, cloud repositories, or other systems where data lives. They may apply access controls, maintain encryption settings, support backup and recovery, monitor storage health, and help enforce retention rules. A custodian usually should not decide the business meaning of the data on their own. That belongs more naturally to the owner or steward. The custodian's role is closer to care and safekeeping. You can picture the owner deciding that a file cabinet contains confidential records, while the custodian makes sure the cabinet is locked, access is controlled, and records are backed up or preserved according to policy. A data steward focuses on the quality, consistency, definition, and proper use of data. Stewardship is especially important when data is shared across teams or used for reporting, analytics, compliance, or decision-making. A data steward may define what a field means, help resolve duplicate records, make sure values are used consistently, and support data classification. If one system uses customer to mean anyone who created an account, while another system uses customer to mean someone who paid for a service, reports can become misleading. A steward helps reduce that confusion by keeping definitions and handling rules clear. Stewards often work between business teams, technology teams, privacy teams, and security teams. They may not own the data in the final accountability sense, and they may not administer the storage platform. Their value comes from making sure the data remains understandable, trustworthy, properly labeled, and fit for its intended use. A data operator is usually closer to the person or team that performs routine actions involving data or systems that handle data. Operators may run jobs, process requests, support workflows, enter data, review queues, monitor system activity, or perform approved operational tasks. The operator role matters because daily handling is where many data mistakes happen. A person may send a file to the wrong recipient, export more fields than needed, leave a report in an unsafe location, or process a request without verifying authorization. Operators need clear procedures because they often interact with data at the point where policy becomes real work. They may not decide the classification of the data or set the privacy purpose, but their actions can still create risk. Strong data protection depends on training, least privilege, workflow controls, logging, and supervision so operators can do necessary work without unnecessary exposure. A data controller is a privacy-focused role that decides why personal data is processed and how that processing will happen. This role is commonly discussed in privacy laws and compliance programs. You do not need to become a lawyer to understand the security idea. The controller is the party that determines the purpose and essential means of processing personal data. If an organization collects customer information to create accounts, deliver services, send notices, or meet legal requirements, that organization may be acting as the controller for that personal data. The controller has high accountability because it is making the main decisions about the data's use. It must understand what is collected, why it is collected, whether the use is appropriate, who receives it, and how the individual's rights and privacy expectations are handled. In plain language, the controller is the party steering the personal data processing. A data processor handles personal data on behalf of a controller. The processor usually does not decide the main reason the data is being processed. Instead, it follows the controller's instructions and provides a service. For example, a company may use a payroll vendor, cloud email provider, customer support platform, or analytics service to process data. The company may be the controller because it decides why employee, customer, or user data is needed. The vendor may be the processor because it handles that data to provide the service. This distinction matters because accountability does not disappear when data is outsourced. The controller still needs to choose processors carefully, set expectations through contracts, understand where data goes, and require appropriate safeguards. The processor also has responsibilities, including protecting the data, following agreed instructions, and notifying the controller when certain issues arise. Outsourcing changes who performs the work, but it does not remove the need for control. A subprocessor is another party brought in by a processor to help process data. This is one more layer in the chain. Imagine a company uses a customer support platform as its processor. That support platform may rely on a cloud hosting provider, email delivery service, translation service, or logging platform to provide parts of its own service. Those additional vendors may be subprocessors. The risk is that data can travel farther than the original organization realizes. A controller may think it is sharing data with one vendor, but that vendor may depend on several other companies. This is why contracts, vendor reviews, data flow mapping, and notification requirements matter. A subprocessor may be perfectly legitimate and necessary, but it still needs to be known, approved when required, and held to appropriate safeguards. The more parties that touch sensitive data, the more important it becomes to understand the full chain of responsibility. These roles are easiest to understand when you compare what each one decides or does. The owner decides what the data means to the organization and what level of protection it needs. The custodian protects and maintains the systems or repositories where the data is stored or processed. The steward helps keep the data accurate, consistent, defined, and properly handled. The operator performs day-to-day work that may create, view, move, update, or process the data. The controller decides why and how personal data is processed. The processor handles personal data for the controller. The subprocessor helps the processor deliver that service. Some organizations may use different names, and sometimes one person may wear more than one hat. The exam is usually less concerned with a company's exact job title and more concerned with the responsibility described in the scenario. Role clarity matters because security failures often happen when everyone assumes someone else is responsible. A security team may ask who approved access to a sensitive dataset and discover that no clear owner exists. A database administrator may protect the server but not know whether the data inside should be classified as confidential. A reporting team may use data fields without understanding that some values are sensitive or regulated. A vendor may process customer data through another service that was never reviewed. These gaps are not always caused by bad intentions. They often come from unclear accountability. When roles are defined, decisions become easier to trace. Access requests can go to the right approver. Retention questions can go to the right business owner. Technical safeguards can be assigned to custodians. Data quality issues can be handled by stewards. Vendor processing can be reviewed through controller, processor, and subprocessor relationships. Access control is one place where these roles become very practical. A data owner may decide which job roles need access to a dataset. A custodian may implement those permissions in the storage platform or application. A steward may help identify which fields are sensitive and which fields can be safely used for reporting. An operator may use the data within the limits of their assigned role. If personal data is being handled by a vendor, the controller should define the permitted processing and the processor should enforce appropriate access within its own environment. If a subprocessor is involved, the same access expectations should carry through the chain. Without this separation, access decisions can become too technical or too informal. A system administrator might be able to grant access, but that does not mean the administrator understands the business need. Good governance separates the ability to make a technical change from the authority to approve the data use. These roles also support privacy and compliance because many requirements depend on knowing who is accountable for specific actions. If someone asks why data was collected, the controller or owner should be able to explain the purpose. If someone asks where data is stored and who can access it, custodians and processors may need to provide details. If a report contains inaccurate or inconsistent data, a steward may help correct definitions and quality problems. If a breach affects a vendor system, the controller, processor, and subprocessor relationships help determine notification paths and responsibilities. Compliance is not just having a policy document. It is being able to show that decisions were made by the right people, safeguards were applied, and data was handled according to its sensitivity and purpose. Role clarity gives an organization evidence that data protection is managed instead of improvised. Another practical issue is separation of duties. If one person can define the data, approve access, administer the system, operate the workflow, and accept the risk without review, mistakes and abuse become harder to catch. Separating roles creates checks and balances. The owner may approve who should access the data, while the custodian implements that access. The steward may identify quality or classification problems, while operators follow approved handling procedures. The controller may set requirements for personal data processing, while processors and subprocessors are expected to follow those requirements. This does not mean every organization needs a separate full-time person for every role. Small organizations may combine responsibilities because they have fewer people. Even then, the responsibilities should still be understood. The same person may perform more than one function, but the organization should know which function they are performing at each point. You should also recognize that these roles are tied to the data lifecycle. When data is created, an owner or controller should understand why it exists and how sensitive it is. When data is stored, custodians help protect it with technical and operational safeguards. When data is used for reporting or analytics, stewards help keep definitions clear and reduce misuse. When data is processed in daily operations, operators need procedures and access limits. When data is shared with vendors, controller, processor, and subprocessor relationships help define legal, security, and privacy expectations. When data reaches the end of its useful life, owners and controllers may help determine retention and disposal requirements, while custodians carry out secure deletion or archival steps. Thinking this way keeps the roles from becoming isolated terms. Each role supports a different part of responsible handling from creation through final disposal. For exam questions, slow down and look for the action being described. If the scenario asks who is accountable for classifying data or approving access based on business need, think data owner. If it asks who maintains the storage environment, applies controls, or performs backups according to requirements, think data custodian. If it asks who maintains data quality, definitions, consistency, and proper use, think data steward. If it asks who performs routine processing or day-to-day handling tasks, think operator. If it asks who determines the purpose and means of processing personal data, think controller. If it asks who processes personal data on the controller's behalf, think processor. If it asks about a vendor used by that processor to help provide the service, think subprocessor. The key is not memorizing a word in isolation. The key is matching the role to the responsibility. The larger lesson is that data protection depends on both technology and accountability. Encryption, masking, tokenization, backups, monitoring, and access control are all important, but they need people and roles behind them. Owners make business decisions about data. Custodians protect and maintain the environments where data lives. Stewards preserve meaning, quality, and appropriate use. Operators handle data through approved workflows. Controllers decide why and how personal data is processed. Processors perform that processing for controllers. Subprocessors extend that work another step down the service chain. When these roles are clear, an organization can make better decisions, respond faster to problems, reduce privacy risk, and show that data is being handled responsibly. For Security Plus, this topic is really about knowing who is accountable for what. Once you can identify that, the role names become much easier to remember and apply.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.